Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be taking a deep dive into stress. My name is Brittany Proctor. I am the licensed professional counselor and chemical dependency counselor here at the VC Counseling Center, and I'm here with
Madison, the counseling associate here at the VC Counseling Center.
So this is a topic we all know a little bit too well, right? Stress. So today we're going to be talking about what exactly is stress and how you can tell when it's just a little pressure versus when it's starting to get really overwhelming for you. We're going to break it down. We're going to share some real life examples and give you some practical tips, tricks to kind of recognize and manage stress before it completely takes over. So whether you're buried in deadlines or just feeling a little bit off, this episode is for you. So let's get started.
So we want to talk about stress for a few different reasons. So it's very real. It's very common, especially on the college campus, and it's manageable. Whenever we think about stress, it can get really overwhelming. We might feel like we're unable to handle these stressors that we're experiencing, but hopefully by the end of today's episode, you'll have a better idea of what it is. We'll normalize it for you and recognize that, hey, I'm not alone in this feeling, and maybe you'll have a little bit of a better idea of how to cope with it.
Yeah, and as always, we have some statistics and some different things to share with you. But today is going to be more kind of like an introduction to stress and the stress response and kind of what we're looking for. So more like how to recognize stress. And then later we'll do another episode that takes more of a deep dive into specific coping skills and specific strategies. But today we just kind of wanted to take a step back. Let's do an introduction and let's kind of just explore what stress is. Okay, Madison, so I will ask you, let's pose the question. Let's define it. What are we talking about when we talk about stress?
So stress defined is the perceived inability to meet life's demands.
And I think that's the important part of this definition here is perception, right? So it's my belief that I can't manage what I'm going through. Obviously, if you think you can manage what you're going through, there's not a problem and you're not stressed. But it's whenever I don't think I can cope with this anymore, that's where it becomes a problem.
For sure. Another good way of defining stress and kind of viewing it is as our body's response to a perceived challenge or demand. So a good example is maybe we see a snake in the road. I hate snakes, so I definitely would want to get out of that situation as fast as possible. And whenever we do see a snake in the road, that's our body's ability to respond and, get in this fight or flight mode to get us out of this, dangerous situation.
Potentially dangerous situation and I have a great story on that too. Just the other weekend we were running in Riverside, Riverside Park here in Victoria, and my husband was running ahead of me, right? And I see him jump 10 feet in the air and fly off the trail, and I was like, what is going on? And I get up there was a coral snake on the sidewalk in Riverside.
Oh no.
And we had to Google it later. I don't know snakes well enough to ID them in real life. But this is the example though, is you see a snake, your body just responds. It doesn't take time to be like, oh, is it a rattlesnake, a coral snake? Let me define this snake.
Let me investigate the snake right
exactly.
now. No,
your brain is let's immediately respond to save your life.
Yes. And that can be a really helpful response whenever we are in moments of actual danger, like seeing a snake in the road. But it can become unhelpful whenever maybe a car cuts us off in traffic, or maybe our partner is like, hey, I need to talk to you. These little tiny things can feel so intense.
Yes,
and a genuine danger.
Do those 3 dots in text and then they disappear. Maybe not real danger, but perceived danger in that moment.
Yep. Our brain, our body can't tell the difference between something that's perceived or a genuine danger.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. Another good kind of differentiation that we want to make is the difference between positive stress, which is known as eustress, and chronic stress. So positive stress, it can be really, keyword positive. It can be motivating. It can help us get through difficult tasks. It's generally short term, and can just help us, get the motivation that we need to get through difficult tasks that we're going through. I know, athletes, they need a certain amount of stress to help kind of motivate them and let them perform at a high level. That's a good example that I like to use when I think about that.
It's another great example too, is even ADHD is peak with this, right? So the stress of a deadline typically motivates someone with ADHD. So that can be another good example of, if that deadline wasn't approaching, you wouldn't really feel the stress to need to take care of business and get assignments done.
For sure. And then on the other hand, we have chronic stress, which is something that's more long-term. So thinking, weeks, months, years on end. It's something that once that stressor is disappeared, we still are feeling those same, physical and mental reactions to stress. And it can really start to have a pretty severe impact on our day-to-day functioning. So the way that we show up for work, for school, in our personal life, it can be really impacted. So I would say those are the differences between positive and chronic stress.
Yeah, and there's so many different sources of stress. I mean, really anything can be a source of stress by definition, right? Because what matters is that you feel like you can't cope with it. I don't believe that I can get through this. And it can look like anything. I mean, it can be school pressure, it can be financial stress. Maybe I'm not in a great place financially and I haven't been, so I'm feeling that chronic and like, long-term stress about that. It could be social expectations or relationships causing me stress. It can even be something as internal as my own identity or my own future and feeling uncertain about those things. We've done a separate episode about career pressure, and that can definitely be a source of chronic stress for a lot of people at this phase in our lives because we're trying to figure out who we are and what we're doing. So these are just some examples of common ones that most students in college struggle with. But like I said, stress can be related to anything in our life. What matters is your perception of it. So another really great example is like finals week, right? Everyone is stressed. Finals week. Everyone, your professors, staff, like everyone on this campus is stressed on finals week. That's a totally normal thing to be stressed about. But when does that stress cross a line in
Yeah, so obviously, whenever it's finals week, we want to prioritize studying and just doing everything we can to perform well, right? We're almost at the end of the semester. It's a great feeling. We're so close to being done. But there's a difference between, okay, maybe I didn't sleep the best because I'm a little stressed versus I literally got 1 to 2 hours of sleep because my body would not let me fall asleep. Or there's a difference between I might have skipped one meal today versus I literally only ate like
or I
one
puke
meal.
every time that I eat, or,
Yeah.
not being able, there's a difference between doubting myself and being worried and spiraling in negative thoughts and not being able to get out of bed for sure.
Definitely. So now we want to kind of go into some different signs that you might be feeling overwhelmed.
So we're going to break these down such a counselor way, but it helps my brain make sense of things. So we're going to break it down by type. So emotional, physical, behavioral, cognitive. So it can include feeling irritable. Maybe you're more on edge than typical. Maybe you're more anxious than usual. You're worried. You're feeling hopeless, or you're feeling numb and totally disconnected from things around you. So this can even look like autopilot mode, where you're just kind of going through the motions and doing the things, but you're not really living life.
For sure. And the next category is physical signs. So this can look like headaches, fatigue, trouble sleeping, stomach issues. The possibilities are endless. Stress can show up in so many ways physically. I know for me personally, I have a lot of muscle tension, especially in my neck and shoulders. There can even be chest pain with stress.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see how much it can affect us physically.
And it's different for each person. Like I clench my teeth, you'll get like the jaw cramps or your jaw will hurt. And the important thing to note here too is that all of these things individually are normal on a daily basis. Some days you're going to have stomach issues. Some days you're going to have a headache. Some days you're going to have fatigue. But once again, with all things we talk about, like we're saying that you're experiencing these things to such a high degree or so commonly that it's a problem. It's a consistent issue for you. I have a headache every day. I have a headache for 12 hours straight most days this week. So just to come back to that like these symptoms in moderation might not indicate stress. It might just be a symptom of being a human that you have a headache. But, when it becomes problematic, it's problematic for sure. Mm-hmm. So, okay, behavioral signs. So this is like things that we do that other people can observe. This can look, once again, like anything, but some common ones are like withdrawing from friends or family, not going to social gatherings like you usually do. So kind of isolating, maybe skipping class or calling in sick to class because you just like can't manage it today. Procrastinating more than usual. I will normalize a certain degree of procrastination for all human beings on the planet. It is just something people do. But if you're procrastinating more than usual or to a higher degree where it's starting to impact your grade, where normally you wouldn't allow that to happen, then maybe I would say it might be a sign that you're stressed or overwhelmed.
Definitely. So, the last category of signs is cognitive signs. So, that can look like brain fog, difficulties concentrating, maybe we're experiencing some negative self talk. So, whenever you think about these symptoms, you can really understand how it can affect a college student, right? And their ability to perform well in their classes, to show up and be present in class. It can really start to impact you. So, a good example would be a student starts skipping meals, zoning out in class, and avoiding texts from friends. What's really going on here in this situation?
Yeah, and that's tough because, like we said earlier, a lot of things in psychology are kind of vague, or a lot of things in human behavior are kind of vague. In this specific scenario, obviously we need more information, but could this be stress? Could this be something else going on in their life? Could they be overwhelmed? Like, there are a million different explanations for an example like this, but stress can be like one question to start with ourselves, asking yourself, like, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the most stressed and overwhelmed I've ever felt in my life, how am I feeling right now? And kind of give yourself that anchor point in that way. It can kind of help us understand, like, wow, I am super overwhelmed right now.
For sure.
So, is another common thing that we get with stress is questioning, okay, where's the line between stress or like a mental disorder, if that makes sense? So, what are some signs that we're in a little bit too deep with stress? That someone may be experiencing too much stress, maybe if we don't even realize it, because a lot of times we don't notice that we're stressed or overwhelmed until we're in full-blown crisis mode. So that's the question, is what are some common signs that this might be too much? And like Madison mentioned earlier, when stress becomes chronic, meaning it's happening every day all the time for a very long period of time, and I feel this way so often that it's basically my normal, this can probably be a problem, right?
Mhm.
It can lead to anxiety, depression, burnout, mental health disorders, but also just like chronic disconnection, like not even engaging a fulfilling life for yourself. We're just kind of
Mhm.
going through the motion in
Yeah.
survival mode,
Yep. Survival
basically,
mode.
for sure. So let's look at some red flags for stress. So, Madison, what do you feel like for you as a counselor would be a red flag in terms of stress?
So, like you mentioned earlier, I think we really want to look at it from, a time point of view. Like you said, it is normal to experience stress, every now and then, but if it starts turning into a few weeks, months, that's whenever we want to kind of really start asking those in-depth questions of like, okay, what is going on in your life that is causing you to feel so revved up and on edge all the time? So definitely those long periods of time is something that I would view as a red flag. Additionally, whenever it starts to interfere with your daily life, like I was talking about earlier, maybe you're not performing well at work or in your classes, or you're kind of isolating yourself from your friends. That's really having a big impact on your day-to-day functioning. And lastly, I think just whenever you feel like life generally feels unmanageable, that's a really terrible feeling and it can get really overwhelming. So I would say those are some main red flags that I would look out for when it comes to stress.
Yeah. And when we talk about this too, we definitely want to normalize help seeking when we feel this overwhelmed. So, those symptoms that Madison was just describing, those red flags, and I totally agree with them that if we're feeling that way, stress isn't a weakness. Stress isn't, you're not strong. That's not what it implies at all. It's just a signal from our body that we're at our limit. Like, we need to do something different. We need something new. We need to take a break, we need to pause, like whatever it might be, it's a sign. It's I think of it like when our car throws a light, it's trying to give you a sign that something is wrong so that we can get in there and figure it out and look at it. And it's so common to, like, we keep coming back to, so many times we don't even realize that we're overwhelmed until we're really, really far in it. And we see it here all the time. We function and we function and we function, and humans are great at that, right? We're all so good at functioning and pushing through things and making it through hard things. And then all of a sudden we wake up and I just can't do it anymore. I can't get up today. I can't go to class. I can't go to work. I can't do anything. So sometimes that chronic pushing through can actually lead to the burnout where we crash and burn. And this is where we come back with counseling all the time, seeking help proactively and learning my stress signs and learning how to manage these things over long term can be really beneficial for your long term health. Not saying that you need counseling forever, but most people just, a quick pop in to look at these things, come up with a plan for yourself, and then implement it. So, okay, what can we do today? We'll briefly go over a handful of common coping skills. Like I said, we'll do a second video where we'll talk about coping skills more in depth. But what can we do today? Some daily practices, short-term practices. Like I said earlier, looking at creating like a stress inventory, right? So ranking myself on a scale of 1 to 10, just checking in mentally. I've seen people really enjoy like stress inventory journals. So like at the end of each day, you sit down and you reflect and you say, okay, what was my stress level today? What were some potential things that stressed me out? Did I do any coping today? Did it help? And kind of tracking all of these things like systematically and seeing if there's specific things that work for you. And another technique can be things like grounding techniques. So box breathing, mindfulness skills. We should have other videos up at this point, that go over some of these techniques in small little bite-sized chunks. Yeah, box breathing, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding methods, all of these things can be great. And then a really practical strategy can be taking micro breaks. Like, don't wait until we're burnout and not functioning to, take a step back and take a minute and take a breather. No, take micro breaks throughout the day, throughout the week, study for 30 minutes, take 10 minutes off. Or even if it's, every morning I'm going to go to the gym before I study, or even if it looks like, every Saturday I'm going to go for a 4-mile walk in Riverside and watch for coral snakes because they do absolutely exist there. Be very careful. But yeah, so just taking those micro breaks and not waiting for total burnout before I'm like, okay, I deserve a break now.
For sure. I love that. I think that's a great introduction to some really helpful strategies for stress. So now I'm going to briefly talk about some more longer term strategies. So one is being setting boundaries with time and people. For a lot of us, it's so easy to just say yes all the time, even whenever we don't have the time for it. We have all these things on our plate, but yet some of us might feel a pressure to just say yes and want to help other people out and do what we can for them. But I think it can be really helpful to ask myself, am I feeling pressured to say yes? Or do I actually have the desire and the time and the mental and physical capacity to take on this task that is being asked of me?
Yeah.
So learning to set those boundaries can be huge for managing your overall stress. Next, like Brittany was previously talking about, meeting and talking with the counselor. And we want to try and prioritize that whenever we're early, in our symptoms, not just in crisis. This isn't meaning that you're weak by any means. This is meaning that you're a human person who is having difficulties responding to all the stressful events that they're going through. So just recognizing, hey, I'm starting to feel like things are a little bit off. Like I'm not really loving how I'm feeling right now. Maybe talking to someone could be beneficial for me to kind of help me figure out how I can develop a plan and get on a better trajectory.
Yeah.
And then lastly, campus resources. So we provide free counseling for all actively enrolled students. That can look like individual counseling, group counseling, couples counseling. We also offer, mental health assessments and screeners. If that's something that you're interested in, we also do, a lot of events around campus, workshops, seminars.
Yeah.
Anything else that I missed there?
Yeah, no. So just really any option that you could want, like preference wise, if you want to be in a group of people to talk about these things, if you want to talk individually, it's about figuring out what's going to work best for you and what you're most comfortable with for sure.
Yeah. So, Brittany, I have a question for you. How can students build resilience to handle stress better over time?
I think that's a really great question because I feel like resilience, first of all, I want to say resilience is absolutely something that we build. It's not, yeah, some people are born with parents who encourage them to be more resilient than others. Some of us don't, we don't win the parent lottery and we don't get parents that teach us healthy skills early. But it's absolutely a skill we can learn, right? And resilience is about, think of it like a bucket, stress like a bucket, right? You are a bucket, stress is water, it fills up over time. People, things, life add water into that bucket. And over time, that bucket's eventually going to overflow because it can only hold so much. Same thing with you. We can only hold so much stress. And resilience is like a tap on that bucket. So resilience is opening the tap and letting a little bit of stress flow out so that it doesn't really become full. So, like these skills we talked about earlier, right? Looking at if I have people pleasing tendencies that lead to more stress, do I have a tendency to take on more things than I need to? Do I have a tendency to over empathize with other people and take their stress on? Do I never take a break? Do I have unrealistic expectations for myself? Like all of these things in a personal inventory can help us see the traits that sometimes maybe cause us stress and be able to come up with a healthier plan to manage these traits, to just kind of turn the tap on our stress every once in a while. But it is, I mean, it's a realistic process to build resilience for all human beings over time. And therapy can be a great tool for that, even. So, in closing, you're not alone. Everyone experiences stress, but not everyone talks about it openly and willingly.
For sure. And I think this is a good time to kind of make a reminder for yourself to either check in, just on yourself personally, or even with your friends. If you kind of identified with any of the things that we talked about here, any of those signs or any of those causes of stress, maybe this is a good time for you to kind of ask yourself, how am I doing really? We're so used to just going 100 miles a minute. We have so many things on our plate. It's understandable. We want to do the best that we can whenever we're facing these stressors, but it's also important to kind of be intentional with yourself and, just take the time for it. And stress management is so important for our overall, functioning and
Mm-hmm.
our well-being.
Yeah.
So just as simple as asking, how am I doing today? What's going on in my life that might be contributing to some stress? Maybe if you see your friends kind of starting to withdraw or isolate, or you can tell that they might be going through a lot more stressors than usual. It's just as simple as sending a text. Hey, I've been thinking about you. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Can make a huge difference and contribute to connection, which is great
Yeah.
for stress management.
Yeah, and that's a great point to make too, even is that like stress isn't about being busy. Like just because I have a lot of things doesn't mean that I'm stressed. Yes, usually having too many things on my plate leads to stress, but stress is an emotional, physical response to something in the environment. So like it's not just about being busy. Your body knows when it's too much right now. Your body knows when it's hit its limit. And usually we get those physical signs before the emotional signs for most people. We just ignore the physical signs and, brush it off and just kind of hyper function through it.
For sure. So before we wrap up, I just want to take a quick minute to just, shout out our counseling center. If you have identified with the information that we talked about, maybe counseling might be a good place for you to kind of start and getting on your healing and wellness journey. You can stop by the counseling center. We're in Student Services Building, Suite 102. You can give us a call, shoot us an email, however you want to, start that interaction with us and get that appointment booked. We're more than happy and ready to help you get that journey started. You can share this episode with a friend, watch it multiple times if you need to. I know I'm someone who have to watch or read something over and over to make sure I grasp that information. So use these videos, to your benefit. This is what they're here for, to help you learn more about mental health and just ways to start getting on the right path to getting better, right? So we're very happy that you were able to join us for today's episode. We hope you learned something new. And this has been Madison.